So it's finally time to start doing some work on my R1 project bike. A few issues with the bike at the moment. The key one being that I've got a fuel leak that's coming from the carburetors, and when I turned the fuel tap off, it pissed fuel all over my hand as well, so that's leaking too. So I've got a fuel leak from the carburetor, a fuel leak from the fuel tap, and I was already thinking about changing the plugs because it's not starting on 4 cylinders and having a good clean of the carburetors. So I've bought myself a carburetor rebuild kit, I've bought myself all the seals for the fuel tap, and it's time to take it apart. So first things first, I'm going to start by pulling the seat off, then the fuel tank, which is full of fuel and has a burst fuel tap, so I'm going to have to be a bit careful not to spill fuel everywhere all over this garage. Seat's easy, 2 bolts at the back, just hidden under the corners of the seat, and then it slides out. Tank's relatively easy, it's held on with a bolt at the front, then it swivels in another bolt at the back. I'm going to have to take the whole thing off here because I want to take the fuel tap off and redo the seals on that. Under the tank you've got to undo the fuel light sender, a couple of hoses, and obviously the fuel hoses that go to the fuel tap itself. Unfortunately for me, I just filled my petrol tank, so it's pretty full. I'm going to have to empty it into a petrol can before I do any more work. And I will flip the tank upside down, put it on a piece of carpet, and then I'll be able to pull the fuel tap off. Unfortunately, it wasn't plain sailing for me, and my fuel lines are also perished, and this one split when I was trying to pull it off the fuel tap, so I'm going to have to get myself some new fuel lines too. Joy. I had a look in my bits boxes, and unfortunately I've only got 8mm fuel lines, and I think this is supposed to run 10mm in an R1. That's internal diameter. Still, never mind. If it wasn't locked down at the moment in New Zealand, then I would easily be able to get these fuel lines, just it's going to take me a week. So I'm in the unfortunate position that one of the fuel tap screws super loose, nice and easy, and one of them appears to have been put in by He-Man 1,000 years ago. So maybe there's a bit of wiggle in this. There isn't. I really don't want to strip it. I can't exactly use a blowtorch in this, can I? I'm giving it a tap. I'm going to try and find a fatter screwdriver. Yes! It moved. I'm kind of surprised that it came out there. I was expecting this to turn into a nightmare. Sweet! Cool. Fuel tap's off. So I'll have a quick go at rebuilding this. I've got a little all balls kit. Part numbers. Looks like it's going to come with everything that I need, I hope. This little gasket in here has been squashed so flat that it just doesn't even look like it was ever round. I'll pop that off in a second. But I think actually what I'll start by doing is taking the knackered piece of fuel pipe that I couldn't get off the fuel tap, and then I'll give the whole thing a little clean. That is just absolutely flat. Completely squashed flat. Right, I managed to start this so that I can peel this little... Oh, I cracked it. Still, should be enough to get it started. And finally peel the whole thing out. Prise it out gently. Boom! That's taken apart. Next I'll pull this off, and this should have a little spring that will shoot everything out if I'm not careful. So I will try not to wreck everything. In fact, I may as well pop these horrible little brittle pieces of gasket off. Right, I'm holding this a bit tight just because it's all spring loaded. Well, I expect it to be spring loaded because I've never taken it apart before. One little screw, two little screws. This. Ah, this is the spring. Got ya. Then this first little O-ring here, I suspect is the larger of the two. I'll lay this out in order so I don't miss anything when I'm putting it back together. Then we'll be taking out this little angry face. Trying to do it gently without causing any damage to any faces. Well, apart from this little rubber face. There's the next piece. Some carb cleaner. Actually got quite a lot of little bits of rubber seal off when I sprayed that there. Let's rebuild this. I'll have my funny little face gasket. Doesn't appear to have an up and a down, both sides look the same. It's definitely thicker than the old one and looks a bit less knackered. Then we've got this little seal here. I hope it's not too presumptuous of me to assume that it goes on here. Yeah, that'll have to be here. Next is this little metal spring washer thing. Right, you've got to build the little front part of the fuel tap before you slide the rest of it in. This is extra footery trying to do it on camera. Anyway, there's the build order. Oh! Feels like it operates pretty decent. Now, I'm concerned I might have given this a little scrape when I was taking that main seal out, so I'm just going to use some P1000 that's already been used, kind of worn down, and try and sand the edges of this little scraped section. Probably hard to get the focus on it, little tiny scrape in here. Probably would seal anyway, but I just think it's a good idea to make sure. Just in case there's some funny little edge that creates a little gap. Next I put this little piece on. Hopefully now I've got a fully sealed fuel tap. that won't piss fuel everywhere. Should be pretty awesome. I'm going to stick it on the bike. Must go that way. Should have two little bolts. Unlike last time, I'm going to put on some little spring washers that came in the kit. Presume that's where they were meant to go. Anyway, you can imagine me just tightening up some bolts and she'll be right. So that's the fuel tap fixed. Turned the tank the right way up and it seals, and I've also opened it to make sure that fuel actually came out when it was open, so it's all good. Thanks for watching this video. Next video I'm going to take the carburetors out and rebuild them. Subscribe if you don't want to miss that riveting event.